those of you that I don't know, I am Amy Oliver, and I have an amazing team over here with me too, and they're in the back. Wave hi. And we're really excited to be here. As Nishan mentioned, we spend all of our time supporting pharmacies and community health practices across the country with so many different services. I'm not going to give you a pitch today, but we'd be happy to just talk to any of you about it. And if you have not been by our booth yet, please come before you go home. We left ours up. It's the only one left, I think, so you can come see us. But I want to talk about how there's a moment that happens in pharmacies, every single day that most people never see. It's not the obvious moments, it's not the prescriptions or the systems or the workflow. It's usually something much quieter than that. And it usually happens sort of in between everything else. You've just opened, the phones are already ringing, there's a line starting to form, you're trying to get your bearings for the day, and someone steps up to the counter, right? And on the surface, it looks very simple. They hand you a prescription, maybe they ask a quick question, but if you're paying attention, sometimes you can feel that it's not really about the prescription at all. It's the pause before they speak. It might be the way that they're holding the piece of paper, some slight hesitation, like they're not even sure how to ask what they actually need. And in that moment, you get to make a choice. You could keep things moving, you can stay on pace, you can answer the question or process the prescription and move on to the next person, or you can slow it down just slightly. You can ask one more question, maybe listen a little bit more carefully, pay attention to what's not being said in that moment, and then that's when something shifts. What walked up to the counter as a transaction becomes something else entirely, and you make it make sense for them. You take something that felt very overwhelming for them, and you break it down. You give them clarity, you give them confidence. And sometimes it's that reassurance that they didn't even realize they were looking for. And then just as quickly, it's over, and you move on. And the day keeps going. But for that moment, and for that person, it stays with them. And that's the part of pharmacy that doesn't get talked about enough. Because pharmacy has never just been about prescriptions. It's never been about dispensing. It's always been about people, about judgment, about care in real time, in small moments that add up to something much bigger. And the difference now is that those moments are no longer staying in the background. What's always been true about this profession is starting to be recognized in a different way, and not just within the walls of our pharmacies, but across the entire system. And that's what the shift is really about. Not becoming something new, but stepping more fully into what pharmacy has always been. And when I look out in this room, I know that every single one of you has had moments like that. Not once, not occasionally, but every single day. And still, you chose to be here. You stepped away from your pharmacies, from your families, from your team, and you decided you were going to spend a little bit of time with us today thinking about how you can look at your role in a different way. And that's not always easy to do because this work doesn't really pause, right? There's not a quiet season where everything slows down and you think, now feels like a really good time for me just to step away and reflect. You had to make the time. And throughout today, I'm sure you've had moments where something clicked, right? Where something felt possible, and probably a few moments where you thought, that sounds great, but how is this actually going to work where I am? And those are the right questions, because that's what's being talked about here today, and it's not small. It's not about tweaking around the edges. It's not about adding one more thing to an already full plate. It's about a shift in how pharmacy is practiced, how you show up, and how you think about your role. And that can feel really exciting, but it can also sometimes feel uncomfortable at the same time. And I've always believed that the most important part of days like today is not actually what's said on the stage. It's the conversations that happen in between. The quick exchanges between sessions, the, "Are you seeing this too?" moments that you have, and that quiet realization that maybe things don't have to stay the same. They don't have to stay the way they are anymore. And that's where the momentum actually starts. And being here, engaging in those conversations, being open to thinking differently, that already says something about each of you. Because you didn't come here because things are easy. You came because they matter. And whether it feels big or small or clear or uncertain, you are already part of what's shifting in this profession. And at the same time, we have to say this out loud. This is kind of hard right now. And there's no way to talk about the future of pharmacy without acknowledging the reality that you're working in today, because it's not happening in a vacuum. You're navigating drug shortages all day that change by the hour. You're trying to manage costs that don't make sense for people anymore. You're working within systems that feel very stretched. And sometimes it's almost like they're pushing back against the very care that you're just trying to provide to people. And all of that's happening while you're trying to lead your team, support your staff, fill the gaps, and somehow keep things moving, and it's a lot. And I think sometimes we move so quickly from one thing to the next that we don't actually stop and acknowledge the weight of that. But it's there, and not just operationally, but also emotionally. That work asks something different of you. You're not just managing prescriptions. You're managing people's fear. You're managing people's frustration. You're managing uncertainty. And you're the one that they come to when they don't understand what is happening in their own care. When something has changed, they come to you. When something isn't available, they come to you. When something doesn't feel right, they come to you. And increasingly, the uncertainty isn't just coming from within our own system. What's happening in the world is showing up at your counter now. You're seeing patients impacted by a variety of global issues, by political decisions that are made far outside of your pharmacy, and by systems that they don't understand but are feeling the effects of in very real ways. And you're supporting patients who move between these systems, and you're seeing these wide ranges of needs, of expectations, and realities come through your doors every day. And in a system that right now feels under strain, that's not a small role. And it's a real significant responsibility to carry, and the truth is you carry it very well, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. So if that's the reality, then the question becomes, what do we actually do with it? Because the idea of stepping, out of the dispensary and into this clinic or this future of pharmacy, it can feel like a really big shift, and sometimes it even gets framed like we're supposed to leave something behind, like the dispensary was just one version of pharmacy and the clinic is the next version. But that's not really what's happening. This isn't necessarily about leaving the dispensary altogether. It's not about walking away from the work that has always defined this profession, but it's about expanding it, stepping more fully into our new roles, and what pharmacy has always been at its core. Because those moments that I talked about earlier, those ones that happen quietly at the counter, those are already clinical. They always have been. The judgment that you use, the questions that you've asked, the way that you interpret what someone is telling you and decide what matters most, that's always been clinical work. And what's changing now is not the work itself. It's how visible it is. It's how it's recognized, and it's how much ownership we take over it. Stepping up now doesn't require necessarily a different space or a different title. It shows up in how you make your decisions and how you approach the person in front of you, and whether you see that interaction as something to move through or something to lean into. It's choosing to prioritize understanding over speed, even when you're working in a space where everything around you is pushing for efficiency. It's taking responsibility not just for getting something done, but for how it lands with the patient. It's seeing yourself as part of that care team and not just someone supporting it from the outside. And that shift, it's subtle in some ways, but it changes everything. Because for a long time, pharmacy has operated in this space where you knew the value of what you do, but not all of that value was fully seen or fully used by others. And you've been doing this work, often quietly and often without recognition. And so that's starting to change now. The expectations are starting to change. Opportunities are changing. And the system is starting to look at pharmacy in a different way. And what's interesting is, even though our physical spaces have not changed that much yet, the counters are still there, the workflow is still there, the phones are still ringing, but what's happening in that space is different now. What's expected of you in that space is different now. And that's where this can feel both exciting and uncomfortable at the same time. But even with all of that, the shift is happening in the small decisions, in how you approach each and every conversation, in the moments where you choose to step in a little further instead of stepping back. It's happening in how patients see you, in how they come to you with more questions and more expectations and more trust. And maybe most importantly, it's happening in how you see yourselves, because this isn't something that gets handed to you all at once. It's something that you need to step into over and over again in the middle of your busy days, in the systems that aren't perfect, and in the moments that don't feel big at the time. And that's what makes it matter. There's a moment in this work that doesn't get talked about often. It's the moment where you realize you could keep going the way things are going, or you could step in, and no one is going to tell you which one to do. No one is standing behind you saying, this is the moment where you go further. Unless you're my client, then I'm actually standing behind you saying that. But there's no protocol that fully captures it. There's no checklist that tells you, this is the one that matters. It just shows up. And it usually doesn't look dramatic. It looks like, a patient who's been in 3 times this week and something still isn't quite right. It looks like a medication that technically makes sense, but doesn't maybe feel right for that person. It looks like a conversation that you could just end or one you could lean into. And in that moment, there's that quiet question that shows up. Am I done now, or am I responsible? And that's the shift, because for a long time in pharmacy, we've been trained to be incredibly good at being done. Accurate, efficient, complete. But the future of this profession is not built on being done. It's built on being responsible for understanding what's really going on, responsible for stepping in when something doesn't sit right, and responsible for the outcomes and not just the tasks. And that doesn't mean that you're going to catch everything. It doesn't mean that you fix everything, but it does mean that you start to see your role differently, and you stop waiting for a moment where it's going to become so obvious, and you just start trusting yourself to recognize it when it is and when it isn't. And you stop asking, is this mine to handle? And you start asking, if not me, then who? Because the truth is, the system isn't going to create a perfect space for those moments, but the patients still need them. And more often than not, you're the one standing closest to them when that happens. And those interactions matter. You may talk to 150 people tomorrow when you go back to work. At least one of those patients, you're going to be the only one they talk to tomorrow. And those interactions matter more than we sometimes realize. So we're not becoming someone different. We're just recognizing and acknowledging that we've been standing in that position all along, and now we're just choosing to step up. So if that's true, if those moments are real, then this next part matters, because the future of pharmacy isn't something that's going to arrive one day fully built, tied up with a nice bow, and just handed to you. It's not waiting somewhere ahead of you for you to step into it. It's being shaped right now, in the way that you practice, in the decisions that you make tomorrow, and in the moments where you choose just to go a little further or not. And I think sometimes we underestimate that. We think the big changes come from policy or regulation or system redesign all the time, and those things matter, they do, but this doesn't move forward because of policy alone. It moves forward because of people like you, because of pharmacists who, in the middle of a busy day, decided to advocate for a patient when it would be easier not to. Because of someone who tries something new, even when it's not fully figured out yet. And because of the quiet leadership that happens in each of your pharmacies every day. Not on a stage, not here with a title, but in the way that you support your team, and the way that you set a tone, and the way that you decide what matters. And we don't need perfect systems. I don't even believe that we always need more time than we already have. You don't need every single thing to be aligned before you start, because if you wait for all of that, you are going to be waiting a very long time. The shift will happen in imperfect conditions. It will happen when you say yes to something that feels just slightly outside of what you've always done. It happens when you trust your own judgment, even when there's not a clear path laid out for you. And it happens when you decide that the way things are is not the way things have to stay. And that's what makes this both a responsibility and an opportunity. You are the one that patients come to when they don't know where else to go. You're the one your team is looking to. And in the middle of all of that, you get to choose over and over again how you show up. And maybe tomorrow you go back and everything looks the same on the surface, right? The same counter, the same workflow, the same pressures. But I hope you don't show up the same way. And that's where change actually begins. Not all at once and not perfectly, but steadily and intentionally, through people who care enough to do something with what they know now and what you've learned today. And so before I go any further, I think that I need to say something that doesn't get said enough to all of you. I want to say thank you, and not in a general way, and not in the kind of way that gets said quickly and moved past, but I mean it in a very real and very specific way. Thank you for the work that nobody sees, for the moments that don't get documented, for the moments that don't get recognized, for the ones that don't show up in any report, but that matter so much more than anyone realizes. And also, thank you for the emotional weight that you carry, for being a steady person when someone else is overwhelmed, for absorbing all of that frustration that was never really about you, and for staying calm when things feel anything but calm. And thank you for the consistency, for showing up again the next day and the day after that, even when the system feels strained, even when you're tired, even when you're not sure how much more you have left to give. Because this work doesn't just ask for your knowledge, it also asks for your patience and your attention and your ability to care over and over again for people who are often meeting you on some of the hardest days of their lives. And that's the kind of work that follows you home. It's the conversations that stay with you, the patients that you think about after your shift ends, the moments where you wonder, did I do enough? If you said the right thing, are they going to be okay? It's holding it together during the day and then feeling the weight of it later, and still you come back again the next day. And you keep showing up for your patients, you keep showing up for your teams. And in the middle of all of that, you're caring in such a human way. And that matters more than anything else. The patients aren't going to remember every prescription. They're not going to remember every detail of what you said to them, but they will remember how they felt when they left your pharmacy. And they'll remember that someone took one moment of time, that someone took that moment to make it make sense, that someone actually saw them as a person and not as a task, and they will remember you. Even if you never hear about it again, even if it was just another moment in your day, it wasn't just a moment to them. And I don't think we say that enough. And it's real and it matters. And I want to tell just one quick story that I'm sure is just one of many I could tell, never mind all the stories that are actually out there. But I used to support a pharmacist who had a pharmacy in one part of rural northern Manitoba. Regular day, helping people all the time. And several years later, she had moved down to Winnipeg and had a different pharmacy. And one day, a woman came into the pharmacy and recognized her and said, like, are you Carrie from Thompson, like up in Thompson? And she goes, yeah. They go, oh my God, you were my pharmacist like 10 years ago. And Carrie goes, oh, great, nice to see you. Like, very normal interaction. The next day, the woman's husband comes into the pharmacy and he starts walking down, like use typical Shoppers Drug Mart, so walking down the aisle towards the pharmacy. And as he's walking down the aisle towards the pharmacy, he's unbuttoning his shirt. Kind of weird, but it all worked out. He's unbuttoning his shirt as he walks towards the pharmacy. And when he gets to the end, you can see he had bypass, big scar down his chest. And he took one look at Carrie and he said, I don't even know if you remember who I am, but you saved my life. And she didn't really remember who he was, but the story goes that he had taken his blood pressure on her blood pressure machine at the store up in Thompson. It was really high. She told him to take it again, and he took it again, and she told him to go to the ER. And that sounds like a pretty normal interaction in all of your pharmacies. And what I think is unfortunate is that there are going to be so many patient outcomes like that one where you have saved people's lives, you have made an enormous difference. They will remember you until the day they die, and you have no idea. because we don't always get that kind of feedback. But you all have a story like that. You just might not know it yet. So as we wrap up this day, I want to come back to that moment we started with, that quiet moment at the counter, the one that doesn't look like much from the outside but feels different from the one that you're standing in when you're the one standing in it. And because that moment is still there and it's waiting for you tomorrow and next week and on the days that feel manageable and on the days that feel anything but manageable. And what's interesting is that nothing about that moment, again, is going to announce itself. The system is not going to pause. There won't be some clear signal that says, this is where you step forward. You're just going to feel it, and it's not something that happens to you. It's something that arrives one day. So how you approach these people in front of you, you need to choose whether you're going to stop at the answer or you're going to stay with the question just a little longer. How you see your role, especially on the days when it would be easier just not to think too deeply about it. And none of that requires permission. You don't need a different title. We don't need a different system. You can lead from exactly where you are right now in the work that you're already doing. And it won't always feel big in that moment. It'll probably feel fairly unremarkable most of the time. But those moments are shaping what this profession becomes, not all at once and not perfectly, but steadily through the way that you show up again and again. So if there's one thing that you carry with you from today, I hope that it's not a huge long list of ideas of things to go and change all at once, but something much simpler. And that's just step forward when it matters. Speak up when something doesn't sit right, and take ownership of the role that you're already in. Because the future of pharmacy isn't something that's waiting for you down some magical road somewhere ahead. It's already here, and it looks like you. Thank you for sharing all of your time today with me, with all of us. I really feel fortunate to spend some time with you. And I know we're over for our time, so I think there's a bit of networking time. I'm happy to take questions if anybody wants to stay. My team is also around, and we could talk all day about all these things. Everybody's hungry for supper. Thank you for your time today.